right. Mm, yeah, I'm sure like many of you are aware of like inflation and how it's causing like the prices. That's how it's causing everything to be unaffordable. So because of all the all the spending and money printing the government is doing, which is like taking like decreasing the value of the currency. So I'm sure like that's pretty much like common knowledge now. But like what's not being talked about is or like that's not being mentioned a lot is the government's plan to increase immigration in Canada despite despite the rising inflation. So I'm going to pull up an article right now that helps explain it all. 'Cause it's not really being talked about. So this is an article from Spencer Fernando. It says, at a time of surging inflation, raising immigration levels is a mistake. It says any conversation about our standard of living must include a rational discussion about how high our immigration levels should be. In many countries, immigration is seen as an issue open for political debate, and why shouldn't it be? Free countries are supposed to be places where we are free to debate and discuss important issues, and immigration is certainly important. However, here in Canada, the immigration debate has become so dominated by political correctness that there is a near total absence of discussion about how high our immigration levels should be, despite Canada having one of the highest immigration rates on a per capita basis in the world. After a dip during the early part of the pandemic, immigration to Canada is surging again, with the Liberals pushing to either match or exceed their target of 450,000 immigrants per year. Further, the Liberals have already issued over 300,000 international study permits. Now, this is where we need to point out how strange it is that this isn't being discussed more, especially by our main political parties. Keep in mind that Canada could cut our immigration rate by 75% and still have a relatively high per capita level of immigration. A 50% cut would leave us with one of the higher rates in the world. Personally, I consider myself pro immigration and want Canada to be a welcoming place for people around the world who are seeking a better life. That said, being pro immigration doesn't mean favoring ever increasing immigration levels, because we need to rationally consider the impact that different levels of immigration have on those who are already living here. What that means is that there are certainly times when the best move is to reduce immigration levels, and this is certainly one of those times. Currently, Canada's economy is in a bad place. Whatever growth we have is propped up by massive government debt fueled spending, a huge expansion of the fiat currency supply, a completely overheated housing market, and huge levels of household debt. Yeah, the like the Canadian economy, the economy in Canada has been like struggling for a while now. It's not like even before like the pandemic and all that. So yeah, like even before 2020, like the Canadian economy was already struggling as the government they're trying to send jobs like manufacturing to other nations like China. So yeah, that's like one of the reasons why like the Canadian economy has been like struggling. So yeah, like and because like our many of our political leaders in Canada, they're not very, like, they say they're about like, like creating jobs and all that, but in reality, like, they're doing the opposite, as they're sending like almost like all our jobs to other countries. So, and like it's like sort of like come to bite, it's sort of like come to bite us, bite us, like, I guess recently, because like we have now, it's like we have no manufacturing left in the country, as like everything comes from like, as like almost every single thing we have in Canada comes from other countries, or like it's produced and manufactured in other countries. So yeah, like we have almost like no like home or like Canadian manufacturing left. So as a result of like these bad government policies, so yeah, like that's not, yeah. So like the Canadian economy, it's pretty much been a bad place for a while. So that's not something new. And now with like the restrictions, and yeah, like now with all these restrictions, it's only gone worse. So so yeah, like that's, yeah, like that's something that the country has been struggling with for some time now. So, then it says sustainable growth comes from rising productivity and GDP increases on a per capita basis. Meanwhile, artificial growth comes from raising your population, which gives a higher overall GDP number, while leaving per capita wealth stagnant or declining. Debt and easy money, all of which continues to pile up vulnerabilities in the economy. This is why, as I noted in a recent column, Canada's economy has been stagnant for quite some time on a per capita basis. Additionally, and keep in mind, this was written in 2019, GDP per capita, the only thing that actually matters in terms of measuring our individual standard of living, has not been going up. Overall, notwithstanding strong population and employment growth and low unemployment, Canada's economic fundamentals look shaky. Business investment per capita and per worker is lower than 11 years ago. Rapid population growth is contributing to higher employment, total hours worked, and aggregate GDP, but it's not boosting GDP per person. That means the economy is not generating meaningful gains in living standards. Economic marriage. What we are seeing today is a government and political class that is intent on generating an economic marriage, attempting to convince Canadians that our economy is growing while no actual growth takes place. Consider that our money supply and population is growing while productivity and per capita income is not. This allows the government to point to an overall GDP figure that is bigger, but what impact does that have on each individual Canadian? Inflation plus low wage growth equals Canadians falling behind. Here's what a recent Here's what a recent Bloomberg article noted about Canada's high levels of immigration and the impact on wages. Canada, unlike the US, quickly started welcoming foreign workers and students again after a brief pandemic halt in what is part of a years old pro immigration policy that's provided its economy with a much more work ready labor force. In the 5 years through 2020, about 1.9 million newcomers came to the country, up from 1.2 million the previous 5 years. The US, 9 times the size of Canada, saw its net flow of immigration drop to about 3.8 million over that time, from 4.5 million. The results are simultaneously terrific and problematic. Companies have been filling job postings at a breakneck clip, pushing payrolls back above pre pandemic levels and allowing them to ramp output back up. But workers, with fewer labor shortages acting as leverage, are scoring tiny wage increases, currently running at 2% on average. That leaves them poor after inflation of almost 5% is factored in. Now, given that inflation is likely even higher than the 4.7% figure the government claims, you can get a sense of how rapidly many Canadians are falling behind. Canadian workers are simultaneously being robbed of their purchasing power and their leverage as the government brings in more and more people while the Bank of Canada rapidly prints money. This would only work if Canada was experiencing some sort of massive technological revolution that was generating huge productivity increases. But since we aren't in the middle of such a moment, printing a bunch of money and bringing in a large number of new people will make individual Canadians poor in real terms. The housing market is also distorted by rapidly increasing immigration as the higher demand combined with the huge expansion of the money supply generates unsustainable increases in housing prices. The climate angle. Another point that should be made is how hypocritical it is for our political class to rapidly increase immigration, even as they seek to weaken our economy and raise our taxes to, quote, fight climate change. More people equals more emissions, since economic activity generated by human beings is what, by definition, causes human generated emissions. Wouldn't you think that those most concerned about climate change would then be opposed to higher immigration? Additionally, higher immigration tends to bring people from countries with low per capita emissions to countries with higher per capita emissions, which certainly seems counterproductive from the perspective of fighting climate change. A rational discussion. Takeaway from all this is that Canada must be able to have a rational and reasonable discussion about immigration, a discussion that truly takes into account the fact that bringing in too many people in a short period of time has real impacts on those who already reside in our country, and those impacts can be negative, especially in moments where the cost of living is surging. High immigration and rampant money printing is not at all helpful for Canadians, and at this time, our country needs lower immigration levels if we are to avoid further deepening our serious economic problems. And I think, yeah, that's the end of the article. So, okay, so yeah, so with Spencer Fernando here, he's saying how like high, like too much immigration is not good, especially like right now with the way the country's doing right now with with like with all these like restrictions and all that and the economy struggling. So he's saying like how like increasing immigration levels doesn't isn't gonna like help solve anything, as all it's gonna do is just like maybe like increase the GDP numbers, but aside from that it doesn't like help with anything as um yeah, it causes like the price, it also causes like the price to increase, like the like the housing, yeah, like when it comes to the housing demand and all that, as it's become like unaffordable for many Canadians to like live in the major cities like Toronto and Vancouver. So as a result of high high housing prices and all that, so and part of that has to do with like the high immigration levels that Canada has. So yeah, like it's not helping in any way. So and also like many like Canadians as well, they're not um yeah, like many are struggling like with um like paying their bills and all that. So and like as a result of like more immigration, like it also prevents them um from like increasing their income and all that. So yeah, and also like another reason, yeah, I know like another reason why the like in Canada, like a lot of like the government wants to increase immigration is because it takes away like opportunities. It takes opportunities away from like Canadian citizens, as yeah, there's a lot of like cheap labor practices happening in Canada where a lot of workplaces they like they simply like they prefer to hire foreign workers, so over like domestic workers, because foreign workers they have less, like they get paid less, and also they have less rights compared to domestic or Canadian workers. So that's like, yes, which makes it easier for employers to take advantage of them. So that's like one of the reasons why like the government wants to increase like immigration. And also like it's a source of revenue too. It's also like a source of revenue for the government, as especially like when it comes to especially when it comes to like education, all that, because in Canada, like international students, they have to pay more than like domestic students. So that's another reason why the government wants to increase immigration, because it's a source of revenue for them, and I think the schools as well. So yeah, so because like international students they have to pay more, so meaning that it's more money for the government and like these like these school and the education system. So yeah, that's another reason why like in Canada like the government wants to increase immigration. So yeah, all this, yeah, and then it's become like like when it comes to talking about issues of immigration in Canada, it's become very like taboo, as it's considered like racist and all that to talk about the issues of immigration, especially like a lot of immigration, or as it's mentioned like in other places, mass immigration. So yeah, like it seems like there's like this one narrative on immigration where like you have to be in support of it no matter what, like even if it's not good for like the country. So yeah, like that's another problem too, where it's become very difficult to like talk about like the issues with immigration because of all this political correctness nonsense that's being like pushed around. So yeah, and especially like and especially when you talk about like you know, and it's also like in some cases it's considered like racist as well, because if they come from certain like countries, like places like like non-Western countries or like less developed countries, then it's considered like racist to speak like to like question or criticize like immigration from those countries, or like or people like migrating from those countries. So yeah, like that's another problem, as like the lack of debate or discussion on immigration is like a huge problem in Canada. So as it's like I know the government they're like trying to like silence any discussion or debate on immigration. So yeah, and also like and also like when it comes to immigration, they're like the government they want to bring in they're also like bringing in people like from these like less developed countries who are most likely not even like inoculated or who haven't taken the jab. So they're okay with bringing like people like that into the country, but at the same time they want to ban Canadians who haven't like taken the shot from traveling anywhere. So like that's like another issue in and of itself. So yeah, like it just shows like how the government like the government in Canada, they're very like, it seems like they don't have the interests of Canadians in mind when it comes to all this. So as it seems like they just want to take away Canadians' ability to do anything. So now like with all this money printing, it's like they're trying to like make Canadians poorer. So because and then they're also like pushing this universal basic income stuff too. So because the government, they want people to be like dependent on them, like they don't want people to be independent, like making their own money and all that. So that's why they're trying to like cause inflation, which causes like the money, like the value of the currency to decrease, which in turn makes like many Canadians poorer. So yeah, and it's all being done to make Canadians like yeah to make Canadians dependent on government. So yeah, and like yeah, and at the same time, the government they're trying to bring in like huge amounts of like they want to increase immigration. Like even though the country is like even though the economy is struggling and all that. So yeah, and yeah, like it's very like I guess it's very concerning, but like it's like very hard. Like yeah, it's become like pretty much difficult to talk about it without being called like racist and all that because when it comes to this whole immigration stuff, there seems to be only one narrative on it as which is like to be in support of which is to be in support of immigration, like even if it isn't like benefiting the country. So because if you don't otherwise if you like question or even yeah like if you criticize or even question like the impact immigration is having on the country, then then you'll be called like racist and like a bunch of other names too. So yeah, that's like a problem. That's a problem. So yeah, like I can close this now. So yeah, like when it comes to immigration, like it's becoming like with all the, like the political correctness stuff that's being pushed by the government, like they want to make it so like you can't talk about like the issues with immigration without being called racist and all that. So yeah, and like they don't, and they're also trying to like downplay the issues of what of like of bringing in like large amounts of of like yeah like they're trying to like they're trying to say how um yeah like lots of immigration is good, like even at this time where the economy's struggling and all that. So and they're just doing it to boost the GDP numbers, not to actually. Other than that, like it's not benefiting anyone, especially Canadians. So as it takes away like opportunity, as it takes away opportunities from them. So yeah, and it also makes Canadians poorer too because like their income like it either like stagnates or decreases as a result of like these huge levels of immigration. So that's another problem as well. So yeah, like that's yeah, and like a lot of and also like a lot of the seems like all the major political parties like they're not like really they're not addressing it, and they all seem to be in support of like mass migration and all that. So as I guess they don't yeah like as I guess they think that it's a good thing, and yeah, and I guess they don't want to like be considered they don't want to like yeah like they're probably more like concerned about being offensive to people. So instead so like that's why they're trying to like talk about how like this whole immigration like mass migration stuff is good for the country and all that, causing like even though it's causing problems like the housing the housing to become unaffordable and all that. So and also like the housing yeah and also like the housing market in Canada, it's like pretty much owned and controlled by foreign investors. So it's pretty much become difficult for the average Canadian citizen to even like own a house, especially now with all the debt the government is accumulating. So yeah, like it's become very difficult for the average Canadian to own a home now. Because so like yeah, it's pretty much like yeah, like unless you're very wealthy, then it's very difficult to pretty much to own a house in Canada now. So as a result of all this like foreign ownership and foreign investment, and yeah, like as a result of all this foreign like ownership of the housing market, it's caused the housing prices to increase. So yeah, like it's become like unaffordable for the average Canadian like person to own a home. So because the housing markets they're like owned by foreign investors. So yeah, that's also another issue as well. So Yeah, like that's everything I want to talk about, and I'll be signing off now.